Elvis Presley stood quietly behind the heavy stage curtain, while the deafening roar of thousands of fans shook the old concert hall. Bright spotlights flashed through the narrow backstage corridor as crew members hurried in every direction carrying cables, microphones, and instruments. It was supposed to be another unforgettable performance in Elvis Presley's legendary career. Fans had traveled from different cities just to see him live for one night. Some had waited outside the venue since early morning hoping to stand closer to the stage. But only minutes before the concert began, the atmosphere backstage suddenly changed into something dark and frightening. Elvis adjusted the collar of his sparkling white suit and looked toward the hallway where nervous security guards whispered to one another. Several workers had noticed unfamiliar men wandering near the loading dock behind the theater. They weren't staff members and they clearly weren't fans. The men wore black jackets, heavy boots, and cold expressions that immediately made everyone uncomfortable. At first, nobody wanted to overreact. Famous concerts often attracted troublemakers or aggressive fans. But the tension escalated quickly when one of the security guards was suddenly shoved hard against the wall during an argument near the back entrance. Within seconds, chaos spread through the backstage area. Crew members stopped working as shouting echoed down the corridor. Several aggressive men pushed past security and demanded to speak directly with Elvis. Stage assistants panicked while organizers rushed to call local police. Inside the dressing room, Elvis remained calm despite the growing fear surrounding him. His manager tried to keep him inside while security attempted to control the situation outside. But then a frightened staff member burst into the room with terrifying news. The men were armed, angry, and threatening to shut down the concert if their demands were ignored. The room fell silent. Nobody knew how dangerous the situation might become. Some staff members begged Elvis to stay hidden until the police arrived. Others suggested canceling the concert completely before violence broke out. Outside in the arena, the audience had no idea what was happening behind the curtain. Thousands of fans continued cheering loudly, waiting impatiently for the king of rock and roll to appear on stage. The sound of the crowd echoed through the building like thunder, while fear grew backstage with every passing second. Elvis slowly stood up from his chair and looked at his manager. "What exactly do they want?" he asked calmly. His manager hesitated before answering. The men were reportedly demanding money and accusing local organizers of refusing protection payments. Several workers believed the Gangsters wanted to intimidate the concert staff and prove their control over the area. The situation was becoming more dangerous by the minute. One stage assistant peeked around the hallway corner. Despite the warnings, Elvis refused to remain hidden. He stared at his reflection in the dressing room mirror for several silent seconds before making a decision that shocked everyone around him. "I'm talking to them," he said firmly. His manager immediately protested, warning him that the men could attack him. Security officers insisted it was far too dangerous. But Elvis ignored their fear. "My fans came here tonight to see a show," he replied calmly. "I'm not hiding while innocent people get threatened." Without waiting for permission, Elvis walked toward the dressing room door and stepped directly into the tense backstage hallway. The corridor instantly became silent when the Gangsters saw him. Even the aggressive men seemed surprised by how calm Elvis appeared standing only a few feet away from them. Security guards moved closer protectively while nervous crew members watched from a distance. The leader of the gang, a tall man with a rough expression and intimidating voice, stepped forward slowly. "Well," he said coldly, "look who finally showed up." Elvis kept his eyes locked on the man without showing fear. "You got a problem with this concert?" he asked. The gangster smirked before explaining that nobody performed in their city without showing respect. He claimed the organizers refused to pay for protection and warned that the show would not continue unless the issue was resolved immediately. The tension became unbearable. Several gangsters stood nearby gripping metal pipes while security guards prepared for the worst. One wrong movement could trigger violence. But Elvis didn't back away. He calmly looked around the hallway before answering. "Those people out there paid to hear music tonight," he said firmly. "Not watch cowards threaten workers backstage." The words instantly changed the mood. The gang leader's expression darkened with anger, while several crew members watched in complete disbelief. Nobody expected Elvis Presley to confront dangerous gangsters directly. "You calling us cowards?" the man growled angrily. Elvis took one step closer without hesitation. "I'm saying if you came looking for fear," he replied calmly. "You picked the wrong building." The hallway became so quiet that even the distant screams of the audience could suddenly be heard more clearly. Then something incredible happened. Thousands of fans inside the arena began chanting Elvis's name louder and louder. "Elvis! Elvis! Elvis!" The sound echoed through the entire building like an earthquake. Even the gangsters looked stunned by the overwhelming energy of the crowd. Elvis glanced toward the stage curtain before turning back toward the men. "You hear that?" he asked quietly. "That's why I'm walking on stage tonight." For the first time, uncertainty appeared in the gang leader's eyes. He realized the audience adored Elvis with unbelievable loyalty, and any violence inside the venue could create massive chaos. Suddenly, police sirens echoed outside the theater. Several gangsters exchanged nervous looks as flashing red and blue lights became visible through the loading dock entrance. One of the men cursed under his breath while another warned that the police were arriving fast. The gang leader stared at Elvis for several long seconds before slowly stepping backward. "This ain't over," he warned coldly. Elvis nodded calmly. "Then next time," he replied, "leave innocent people out of it." Within moments, police officers stormed through the backstage entrance while the gangsters rushed toward the back exit trying to escape. Security quickly locked down the building as officers chased several suspects through the parking area behind the theater. Backstage workers stood frozen in disbelief, struggling to process what had just happened. One young stagehand looked at Elvis with shock and whispered, "You could have been killed." Elvis simply adjusted his jacket and answered quietly, "But I wasn't." The stage manager rushed toward him nervously and explained that the crowd was becoming restless due to the delay. The concert needed to begin immediately or organizers feared the audience might panic. Elvis looked toward the curtain where thousands of screaming fans continued waiting for him. Then he smiled slightly and said four simple words that instantly changed the mood backstage. "Open the curtain now." Seconds later, the arena lights dimmed. The audience erupted into deafening screams as the announcer's voice echoed through the building. "Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis Presley." The curtain flew open, revealing Elvis standing proudly beneath the bright stage lights in his sparkling white suit. Fans screamed so loudly that the floor itself seemed to shake. Flashbulbs exploded throughout the crowd, while Elvis stepped confidently toward the microphone, as though nothing dangerous had happened only minutes earlier backstage. Then the music began. Elvis performed with incredible energy, pouring every ounce of emotion into the show. His voice filled the arena powerfully while fans cried, danced, screamed, and reached desperately toward the stage. Nobody in the audience realized how close the concert had come to disaster. The fear, threats, and violence backstage disappeared beneath the excitement of the performance. For the fans, it became one of the greatest nights of their lives. But for the workers who witnessed the confrontation backstage, it became a story they would never forget. Hours later, after the concert finally ended, exhausted crew members quietly packed equipment, while police officers continued investigating outside the venue. Rumors spread quickly about who the gangsters were and why they targeted the concert. Some believed they were local criminals trying to extort money from organizers. Others suspected they wanted attention from disrupting one of the biggest music stars in America. But Elvis himself barely spoke about the terrifying incident afterward. As he prepared to leave the theater under heavy police escort, reporters shouted questions from behind barricades. One journalist finally managed to ask the question everyone wanted answered. "Mr. Presley?" the reporter yelled. "Were you afraid tonight?" Elvis paused briefly before entering the car. Then he smiled faintly and gave a response that would later become legendary among fans and concert workers alike. "I was more afraid of disappointing the audience." The car door closed, and moments later the king of rock and roll disappeared into the night. But the memory of that tense backstage confrontation lived on for years afterward. Everyone who witnessed the terrifying incident agreed on one thing. When fear consumed the building and danger stood only feet away from the stage, Elvis Presley never backed down.